The security cameras at Fitness Elite on West 8th Street captured everything that Tuesday morning in March. Frame by frame, they recorded Brad Mitchell's confident stride across the main floor, his practiced smile as he approached the front desk, and the exact moment his expression shifted from smugness to confusion, then to something approaching terror. What the cameras couldn't capture was the weight of 3 years' worth of calculated planning that walked through those doors with me that morning. They couldn't record the sound of a man's entire worldview cracking apart, or the moment when someone who had dismissed another human being as worthless realized he had made the most expensive mistake of his life. My name is Michael Thompson, and 6 months earlier, I had been nothing more than Brad Mitchell's fat IT guy, someone to be discarded when I no longer fit his vision of corporate success. But that Tuesday morning, I became something Brad had never anticipated: his landlord, his creditor, and ultimately, the architect of his professional downfall. The cameras recorded what happened that day, but they couldn't capture the 3-year journey that led to that moment. They couldn't show the quiet rage that had built inside me during sleepless nights, or the methodical planning that had turned that rage into something far more powerful. Justice served cold, calculated, and absolutely devastating. This is the story of how a 280-pound computer programmer from Anderson, Indiana, took down a fitness empire built on arrogance and shallow values. This is the story of how the weakest person in the room became the strongest, not by lifting weights, but by lifting the weight of truth. The morning I was fired, I had arrived at Fitness Elite's flagship location on West 8th Street at 6:30 a.m., same as I had every weekday for the past 3 years. The gym server had been acting up overnight, throwing database errors that would cripple their member check-in system if not addressed before the morning rush. While Anderson's eager fitness enthusiasts were still hitting their snooze buttons, I was already troubleshooting network connectivity issues and optimizing database queries. At 34, I weighed 280 pounds and wore size 3XL polo shirts that I bought in bulk from Walmart. My receding hairline and thick-rimmed glasses completed the stereotypical image of a computer programmer who spent more time debugging code than doing cart-and-bell exercises. But what I lacked in physical fitness, I more than compensated for in technical competence. Over 3 years, I had single-handedly built and maintained Fitness Elite's entire IT infrastructure across their 12 locations throughout Madison County. I had designed their member management system from scratch, implemented their point-of-sale integration, configured their security camera networks, and maintained their website and mobile application. When their payment processing crashed, I fixed it. When their air conditioning system's smart controls went haywire, I reprogrammed them. When the GM at their Pendleton location accidentally deleted 2 months of member data, I recovered it from backup systems I had personally configured. My performance reviews consistently rated me as exceeds expectations. My salary was $89,000 annually, good money in Anderson, where you could still buy a decent house for under $150,000. I lived modestly in a ranch-style home on the east side of town, drove a reliable Honda Civic, and had managed to save nearly $320,000 over the years by living well below my means. Brad Mitchell, Fitness Elite's regional manager, had hired me straight out of Ball State University's computer science program. At 42, Brad embodied everything Fitness Elite represented. 6'2", perpetually tanned, with the kind of artificially enhanced physique that came from years of disciplined workouts and carefully managed supplements. His office walls were decorated with fitness competition photos, motivational posters about crushing goals, and framed articles about Fitness Elite's dynamic growth trajectory. For 3 years, our professional relationship had been cordial but distant. Brad needed someone to keep his technology running, and I needed steady employment with decent benefits. He made jokes about my weight that walked the line between casual ribbing and workplace harassment, but I had developed thick skin during my childhood in Anderson's public schools. As long as my paychecks cleared and my work was appreciated, I could tolerate Brad's superficial worldview. That tolerance ended on Tuesday, March 15th, when Brad called me into his corner office at 10:30 a.m. His desk was cluttered with protein powder samples, fitness magazines, and a half-empty bottle of some green superfood supplement that probably cost more than most people's weekly grocery budget. The walls displayed motivational quotes in aggressive fonts. Success is not given, it's earned, and champions train, losers complain. Behind his leather chair hung a large photograph of Brad posing with several other fitness industry executives at some corporate retreat, all of them displaying the same artificial smiles and chemically enhanced physiques. Brad didn't invite me to sit. Instead, he remained standing behind his desk, adjusting his Fitness Elite polo shirt in a way that emphasized his biceps. His expression carried the practiced seriousness of someone who had rehearsed this conversation multiple times. "Michael," he began, his voice taking on the fake sincerity that managers use when delivering bad news. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about our brand direction, and I've made some tough decisions about staff restructuring." The word restructuring hit my stomach like a cold weight. In corporate speak, restructuring rarely meant good news for the people being restructured. Brad continued, his eyes focused somewhere just above my left shoulder, avoiding direct eye contact. "Fitness Elite is evolving. We're not just a gym anymore. We're a lifestyle brand. Our members don't just want fitness services. They want inspiration. They want to see success stories walking around our facilities. They want to believe that transformation is possible." I remained silent, already understanding where this conversation was heading, but hoping I was wrong. "The thing is," Brad said, finally meeting my eyes, "our team members need to embody the transformation we're selling. They need to be living proof that our programs work, that our lifestyle delivers results." He gestured vaguely in my direction. "You're great at what you do, Michael. Really great. But you're not. Well, you're not exactly the image we need to project moving forward." The euphemistic language couldn't disguise the brutal reality. I was being fired for being fat. "I see," I said, my voice remarkably steady considering the rage that was building in my chest. "And how exactly does my physical appearance affect my ability to maintain your network infrastructure?" Brad's face flushed slightly, a tell that indicated he wasn't comfortable with direct confrontation. "It's not about your technical abilities. It's about the complete package. Our members see you around the facility, and they make assumptions. They wonder why someone who works at a fitness center doesn't, participate in the fitness." "I maintain your computer systems," I replied. "I'm not a personal trainer." "But perception matters," Brad said, his voice taking on a slightly defensive tone. "When members see staff who don't embody our values, it undermines our credibility. It sends the wrong message about what we stand for." I almost laughed at the irony. Fitness Elite's values, as far as I had observed, consisted primarily of overcharging middle-class families for basic gym equipment, pushing unnecessary supplements, and creating an environment where people felt inadequate unless they looked like fitness magazine covers. The company's actual business model was built on member guilt and insecurity, not health or wellness. "So you're terminating me because you don't like how I look?" I said. "I'm restructuring your position because we're moving in a different direction," Brad corrected, though his semantics couldn't disguise the discriminatory nature of his decision. "We're going to outsource IT support moving forward. It's more cost-effective, and it gives us more flexibility." Outsourcing, the classic corporate excuse for decisions that had nothing to do with efficiency or cost-effectiveness. Brad had no idea what I actually did or how complex the systems I maintained really were. To him, IT was just computer stuff that any random contractor could handle. "We'll give you 4 weeks severance," Brad continued, "plus a standard reference letter. I'll personally recommend you to other companies in the area. You're talented, Michael. You'll land on your feet." 4 weeks severance after 3 years of dedicated service. In Indiana, that was actually more generous than the legal minimum, but it felt insulting given the circumstances. "I'll need you to turn in your access cards and equipment today," Brad said, producing a cardboard box that he had clearly prepared before our meeting. "Sarah from HR will walk you through the exit process." Sarah Williams, Fitness Elite's Human Resources Coordinator, was a nervous woman in her 50s who had started working for the company about 6 months earlier. She had the permanent expression of someone who spent her days managing other people's workplace crises while trying to avoid creating her own. When she appeared in Brad's doorway, her face carried a mixture of sympathy and professional detachment. "Michael," she said softly, "I'm sorry about this. Let's go take care of the paperwork." As I followed Sarah to her office, carrying the cardboard box containing my personal items, a stress ball shaped like a computer mouse, a world's best programmer coffee mug my sister had given me, my backup pair of glasses, and a small cactus that had somehow survived 3 years under fluorescent lights, I wasn't thinking about unemployment benefits or job search strategies. I was thinking about the phone conversation I had overheard 3 weeks earlier. Brad had been in his office with the door partially open, talking loudly into his speakerphone with someone from Fitness Elite's corporate real estate division. The topic was the lease on their flagship West 8th Street location, the building where I was now being fired. "The rent is killing our margins," Brad had complained. $1,800 a month for this location is way above market rate. The old man who owns the building won't negotiate, won't consider early termination, won't budge on anything. If we could get out of this lease, we'd save over $20,000 a year. The old man who owned the building was Robert Hayes, a retired Anderson businessman who had made his fortune operating a successful trucking company until the late 1990s. I knew this because I had done contract work for Robert's company back in 2019, helping them upgrade their dispatch and logistics software before he sold the business and transitioned into real estate investment. Robert had been impressed with my work, not just technically but personally. He appreciated that I showed up on time, communicated clearly, and treated his employees with respect. When the project was finished, he had told me that I was the kind of young man who would go far in business if given the right opportunities. He had given me his personal business card and told me to call him if I ever needed anything. I still had that card in my wallet. Sarah's exit interview was perfunctory and awkward. She had me sign forms acknowledging receipt of my final paycheck, confirming the return of company property, and agreeing to a non-disclosure agreement that would prevent me from sharing proprietary business information with competitors. The NDA was standard boilerplate language, but I read it carefully anyway, noting that it said nothing about sharing information about discriminatory employment practices. "Michael," Sarah said as I signed the final document, "I want you to know that this decision came entirely from Brad in the corporate office. I wasn't consulted, and if I had been, I would have recommended against it." She lowered her voice. "Your work has been exceptional, and frankly, I think this is a mistake." "I appreciate that, Sarah," I said. "Can I ask you something?" She nodded. "Have you seen any documentation about outsourcing IT support? Contracts with service providers, budget allocations, anything like that?" Sarah's expression became guarded. "I haven't seen anything official. Why do you ask?" "Just curious about the transition plan," I said. "I want to make sure whoever takes over has everything they need to keep the systems running." That was partially true. I did care about the systems I had built, and I didn't want innocent employees or gym members to suffer because of Brad's poor planning. But I was also gathering intelligence about whether Brad actually had a plan for replacing me, or whether he was simply making decisions based on impulse and prejudice. As I walked out of Fitness Elite for what I assumed would be the last time, carrying my cardboard box of personal items, I wasn't feeling sorry for myself. I was feeling curious. Curious about what would happen when Brad discovered that computer stuff wasn't as simple as he imagined. Curious about whether his discrimination lawsuit exposure might be as significant as I suspected. And most curious of all about whether Robert Hayes was still interested in selling his real estate portfolio. The March air was crisp as I loaded my box into the Honda's trunk. Across the parking lot, I could see gym members coming and going, most of them unaware that the person who kept their membership cards working, their payment processing functional, and their personal data secure had just been fired for failing to embody the right image. I drove home to my modest ranch house on the east side of Anderson, but I wasn't planning to spend the afternoon updating my resume or searching job boards. Instead, I was planning to make a phone call that would set in motion a chain of events that would ultimately cost Brad Mitchell everything he thought he had built. Robert Hayes answered his phone on the second ring, his voice carrying the same warmth and directness I remembered from our previous interactions. Robert Hayes speaking. Mr. Hayes, this is Michael Thompson. I did the software upgrade for your trucking company back in 2019. You told me to call if I ever needed anything. Michael, of course I remember you. The computer fellow who actually knew how to explain things in plain English. How are you doing, son? I'm well, thank you. I was wondering if you might have time to discuss a business opportunity. Always have time for business opportunities. What did you have in mind? I'd prefer to discuss it in person, if that's possible. Are you free for coffee sometime this week? Robert's chuckle came through clearly. Son, I'm 73 years old and retired. I'm free pretty much any time you want to meet. How about tomorrow morning at 9? There's a little diner on Meridian Street called Betty's that makes the best coffee in Anderson. Betty's Diner was an Anderson institution, the kind of place where farmers and factory workers have been gathering for breakfast since the 1950s. The red vinyl booths were worn smooth by decades of use, and the coffee was served in heavy white ceramic mugs that looked like they belonged in a museum. Betty herself, now in her 80s, still worked the morning shift and could remember the regular customers' orders without writing anything down. Robert was already seated when I arrived, reading a copy of the Herald Bulletin and working his way through what appeared to be a substantial breakfast. At 73, he remained an imposing figure, tall, broad-shouldered, with silver hair and the kind of weathered hands that spoke of a lifetime of physical work before he transitioned into business ownership. Michael, he said, standing to shake my hand with a grip that was still impressively firm. Good to see you again. Sit down and tell me what's on your mind. Betty appeared before I could fully settle into the booth, coffee pot in hand. What do you have, honey? Just coffee and wheat toast, please. Make that 2 orders of toast, Robert added, and maybe some of that strawberry jam. After Betty departed, Robert leaned back in his booth and studied me with the sharp eyes of someone who had spent decades evaluating business deals and judging character. You look like a man with something serious on his mind, he said. What kind of business opportunity are we talking about? I'm interested in purchasing real estate, I said. Specifically, I'm wondering if you're still interested in selling any of your investment properties. Robert's eyebrows rose slightly. That's a hell of a career change from computer programming. What's got you interested in real estate all of a sudden? I had spent considerable time the previous evening deciding how much to reveal about my situation. Ultimately, I had concluded that Robert Hayes was the kind of man who appreciated directness and honesty. I was terminated from my job yesterday, I said. The official reason was corporate restructuring, but the actual reason was that my boss decided my appearance didn't fit with the company's image. Robert's expression darkened. You're telling me they fired you for being overweight? That's exactly what I'm telling you. Son of a bitch, Robert muttered, then glanced around to make sure Betty hadn't heard him swear. Part of my language, but that's about the most ridiculous thing I've heard in a long time. What company was this? Fitness Elite, the gym chain. Fitness Elite. Robert repeated the name with obvious distaste. I know that company. They lease my building on West 8th Street. Been nothing but trouble since day one. This was even better than I had hoped. What kind of trouble? Late rent payments, constant complaints about lease terms, requests for modifications they don't want to pay for. Robert shook his head. The manager, what's his name? Brad something, that boy thinks he can charm his way out of every obligation. Calls me up every few months trying to renegotiate the rent, claiming business is slow or the market rate has dropped. Pure nonsense. Betty returned with my toast and Robert's jam, providing a brief pause in our conversation. After she left, Robert continued. I've been in business for 50 years, Michael. I've dealt with good tenants and bad tenants, honest people and con artists. That fitness company falls squarely into the con artist category. They signed a lease agreement, and now they want to pretend it doesn't mean what it says. Are you still interested in selling the building? I'm interested in selling my entire portfolio, Robert said. Martha and I want to move to Florida, be closer to our grandchildren. But I need buyers who understand what they're getting into and have the resources to close quickly. What's the asking price for the West 8th Street property? $2.1 million. That's below market value for a quick sale. Robert studied my face carefully. That's a lot of money for a computer programmer, even one with a steady job. I had anticipated this question. I have savings, and I have access to investment capital through family connections. This was technically true, though it required some creative interpretation. My uncle Danny Thompson had done well for himself operating a successful auto parts distribution business, and my cousin Jennifer was a commercial loan officer at Anderson's largest bank. I hadn't actually spoken to either of them about investing in real estate, but I was confident they would be interested in a solid opportunity. The building generates about $22,000 a month in rental income, Robert continued. The fitness company pays $1,800, and the rest comes from the other commercial tenants, a tax preparation service, a small law firm, and an insurance agency. All solid, long-term leases. The numbers were promising. With proper financing, the rental income would more than cover the mortgage payments, property taxes, and basic maintenance costs. The investment would essentially pay for itself while giving me direct control over Brad Mitchell's business location. I'd like to make you an offer, I said. Robert smiled. I haven't even shown you the property yet. I know the property. I worked there for 3 years. Right, of course. Robert's smile widened. What did you have in mind? $2 million, cash purchase, 30-day closing. Robert's coffee mug paused halfway to his lips. Cash. Cash. Son, you're either independently wealthy or you're planning to rob a bank. Which is it? I laughed, the first genuine laugh I'd had since being fired. I'll need to make some phone calls, but yes, I can arrange cash financing. Well, I'll be damned, Robert said. Michael, if you can come up with $2 million in cash, I'll sell you that building today. But I have to ask, what's your endgame here? This seems like an expensive way to get revenge on your former employer. It's not about revenge, I said, though that wasn't entirely true. It's about building something better. Robert studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I think I understand. You want to show them what they lost when they let you go. Something like that. Well, in that case, let's talk details. We spent the next hour discussing property conditions, lease agreements, maintenance responsibilities, and transfer procedures. Robert had all the relevant documentation with him. Apparently, he was always prepared for potential deals, and I reviewed the tenant contracts, property assessments, and financial statements with a systematic attention to detail that had made me good at my job. The Fitness Elite lease was particularly interesting. Brad had been complaining about $1,800 per month, but the lease actually specified that rent would increase by 3% annually, and the company was currently underpaying by nearly $200 per month. There were also several clauses about property maintenance, insurance requirements, and tenant modifications that Fitness Elite was either ignoring or handling improperly. More importantly, the lease included language about professional business standards and maintaining the property's reputation and value. Given that Brad had just fired an employee for discriminatory reasons, there might be grounds to argue that Fitness Elite was violating the terms of their lease agreement. Robert, I said, I noticed that Fitness Elite is currently underpaying rent according to the annual increase clause. That's right. They keep sending checks for the original amount, and every time I call to remind them about the increases, that Brad fellow tells me he'll look into it and never follows up. How much do they owe in back rent? Robert pulled out a calculator and did some quick math. About $1,400 plus late fees. I keep meaning to get serious about it, but frankly, I've been more focused on selling the building than chasing down every nickel and dime. Would you be willing to transfer all outstanding debts to the new owner? Absolutely. In fact, I prefer it. Let somebody else deal with their nonsense. By the time we finished breakfast, I had a verbal agreement to purchase the building for $2 million, with a 30-day closing period and all existing tenant obligations transferred to me as the new owner. Robert would provide me with copies of all relevant documents, and I would begin arranging financing immediately. Michael, Robert said as we prepared to leave, I have to ask you one more time. Are you sure about this? $2 million is a lot of money to spend on settling a score with your former boss. I'm sure, I said, but it's not about settling a score. It's about building something that lasts. Robert shook his hand again, his grip just as firm as when I had arrived. In that case, I think you're going to do just fine in the real estate business. As I drove home for Betty's Diner, I was already mentally composing the phone calls I would need to make. Uncle Danny first, to discuss investment opportunities and potential returns. Then Cousin Jennifer, to explore financing options and loan structures. Then my lawyer, David Hendricks, to review contracts and ensure everything was handled properly. Brad Mitchell had fired me because he assumed I was weak, disposable, and lacking in resources or connections. He was about to discover that his assumptions were spectacularly wrong. The phone call to Uncle Danny went better than I had anticipated. Danny Thompson had built his auto parts distribution business from a single garage operation into a company that supplied dealerships and repair shops throughout central Indiana. At 61, he was financially secure, intellectually sharp, and always interested in solid investment opportunities. Real estate, he said after I explained my proposal. That's a hell of a career pivot, Michael. What's the return on investment looking like? I walked him through the numbers: purchase price, rental income, operating expenses, and projected appreciation. The West 8th Street building would generate approximately 12% annual return, which was considerably better than most stock market investments and far more stable than the tech sector volatility that have been making everyone nervous lately. The location is solid, I continued. West 8th Street is one of Anderson's primary commercial corridors, with good traffic flow and established businesses. The building is well maintained, and the tenant mix is stable. What about property management? You ever run commercial real estate before? No, but I'm good at managing complex systems, and I learn fast. Plus, I'll have professional property management services available if needed. Danny was quiet for a moment, presumably running calculations in his head. You said you need $1.6 million in financing? That's right. I could put down $400,000 of my own money. I can do $800,000 at 6% interest, 15-year term. Jennifer can probably arrange the rest through the bank. Sound reasonable? It sounded better than reasonable. It sounded like a path to financial independence and sweet, methodical revenge. That sounds perfect, Uncle Danny. I really appreciate this. Hell, Michael, I appreciate you bringing me a decent investment opportunity. Most people your age want to borrow money for cars or boats or other nonsense that depreciates the moment you sign the papers. Real estate, on the other hand, that's how you build actual wealth. The conversation with cousin Jennifer was equally productive. As a commercial loan officer, she had access to investment loan programs that individual borrowers typically couldn't access. More importantly, she understood the Anderson commercial real estate market and could confirm that Robert's asking price was indeed below market value. The West 8th Street corridor has been appreciating steadily for the past 5 years, she explained. You're looking at properties that were worth maybe $1.5 million in 2019 that are now appraising for $2, $3, or $4 million. If you can get this building for $2 million, you're basically buying it at 2020 prices. What kind of loan terms can you offer? For $800,000, I could do 30-year commercial mortgage at 8% with the building as collateral. Your debt-to-income ratio will be excellent once the rental income is factored in. How long for approval and processing? 2 weeks, maybe less if all your documentation is clean. David Hendricks, my lawyer, was more cautious. David had handled my real estate purchase, preparation, and a few minor legal matters over the years, and he had developed a reputation for being thorough, conservative, and protective of his clients' interests. Michael, he said after reviewing the preliminary documents I had received from Robert, this is a significant financial commitment. Have you considered all the potential risks? Such as, property management is more complicated than most people realize. Tenant disputes, maintenance issues, insurance claims, tax obligations. There are a lot of moving parts. I understand that. And there's the matter of your former employer. If your primary motivation is retaliation for wrongful termination, there might be more direct legal approaches to consider. This isn't about retaliation, I said, though David's skeptical expression suggested he didn't entirely believe me. This is about building a stable financial future. All right, but I want to make sure you understand your obligations as a landlord, particularly regarding tenant rights and lease enforcement. Just because you'll own the building doesn't mean you can arbitrarily change the terms of existing agreements. Of course not. I want to be a professional, responsible property owner. David nodded, though he continued to look concerned. In that case, let me review all the contracts in detail and make sure everything is structured properly. While David handled the legal review and Jennifer processed the loan application, I spent time researching property management best practices, landlord-tenant law in Indiana, and commercial real estate investment strategies. I also began developing a comprehensive transition plan for taking over the building operations. The research revealed several interesting details about Fitness Elite's lease agreement and current standing. Not only were they behind on rent payments, but they had also made several unauthorized modifications to their space, installing additional electrical outlets, modifying the HVAC system for their equipment needs, and removing a wall between 2 adjoining rooms, without obtaining proper permits or landlord approval. More significantly, I discovered that Fitness Elite had been advertising their West 8th Street location as their flagship facility and using images of the building in their marketing materials without permission from the property owner. The lease agreement specifically prohibited using the building's exterior or interior for promotional purposes without written consent. These violations might seem minor, but they represented a pattern of disregarding contractual obligations and assuming that rules didn't apply to them. As the new property owner, I would have the legal right to enforce all lease terms and require compliance with all applicable regulations. 23 days after my breakfast with Robert Hayes, I received confirmation that all financing was approved and the sale could proceed as scheduled. Danny's investment group had provided $800,000. Jennifer's bank had approved the commercial mortgage for the remaining $800,000, and I had transferred $400,000 from my personal savings account. David had reviewed every document multiple times and confirmed that all contracts were properly structured. Robert had provided clear title to the property, with no liens, disputes, or outstanding obligations beyond the normal tenant leases. On Friday, April 8th, I drove to Robert's lawyer's office on Main Street for the closing ceremony. The office was located in one of Anderson's historic buildings, with high ceilings, hardwood floors, and the kind of solid craftsmanship that didn't exist in modern construction. Robert was already there when I arrived, along with his lawyer, my lawyer, and a representative from the title company. The actual transaction was surprisingly anticlimactic. A series of signatures, document transfers, and electronic fund transfers that took less than an hour. At 11:30 a.m., I officially became the owner of a 24,000 square foot commercial building on West 8th Street, along with all existing tenant leases, rental obligations, and property management responsibilities. "Congratulations, Michael," Robert said as we shook hands one final time. "I think you're going to do well with this property. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. Thank you for making it easy. Cash buyers who can close in 30 days. That's every seller's dream." As I walked out of the lawyer's office, carrying a folder containing deeds, insurance policies, tenant contracts, and building maintenance records, I felt a mixture of excitement and nervous anticipation. I now owned the building where Brad Mitchell operated his business, along with the legal authority to enforce every clause of his lease agreement. But I wasn't planning to march over to Fitness Elite immediately and announce my new status as Brad's landlord. Instead, I was planning to take a much more methodical approach, one that would give Brad plenty of time to dig himself into an even deeper hole before he realized what was happening. The first step was to conduct a comprehensive property assessment, documenting every lease violation, every unauthorized modification, and every outstanding obligation. I wanted to have an ironclad legal foundation before I made any moves that might be construed as retaliatory. The second step was to establish myself as a professional, responsible property owner with all my other tenants. I wanted them to see me as an improvement over Robert's relatively hands-off management style, not as someone who was focused on personal vendettas. Only after I had established myself as the building's owner would I turn my attention to bringing Fitness Elite into compliance with their lease obligations. And only after that would Brad Mitchell discover that his decision to fire the fat IT guy had been the most expensive mistake of his professional career. I scheduled tenant meetings for Monday morning, starting with the other businesses in the building. Patricia Williams ran Williams Tax Service from a suite on the second floor, preparing returns for families and small businesses throughout Anderson. She had been in the building for 8 years and had always paid her rent on time and maintained her space professionally. "Mr. Thompson," she said when I introduced myself as the new building owner, "I have to say, I'm impressed. Mr. Hayes was a good landlord, but he wasn't very hands-on. It's nice to meet someone who seems more involved. I want to make sure all our tenants are satisfied and that the building is well maintained. Well, I can tell you right away that the heating system needs attention. My office gets freezing in the winter, and the gym downstairs is always complaining about their air conditioning." This was useful information. Climate control issues would give me legitimate grounds to inspect all the building's mechanical systems, including any unauthorized modifications that Fitness Elite might have made. James Peterson operated Peterson Insurance from the first floor, East Wing. He was a soft-spoken man in his 60s who had been in the building for 6 years and maintained one of the most professional office spaces I had ever seen. His waiting area looked like something from a high-end law firm, with leather furniture, original artwork, and a receptionist who treated every visitor with courtesy and respect. "I'm pleased to meet you, Mr. Thompson. I hope you'll find this building to be a good investment." "I'm confident it will be. Are there any building issues you think I should be aware of? James considered the question carefully. The parking situation can be challenging during peak hours. The gym tends to dominate the lot, and their members don't always respect the designated spaces for other businesses. Another useful data point. Parking violations might seem trivial, but lease agreements typically included specific provisions about shared facilities and tenant responsibilities. The third tenant was Miller and Associates, a small law firm that occupied the second-floor west wing. Sarah Miller was a recent graduate from Indiana University's law school who had started her practice focusing on family law and estate planning. She was professional, articulate, and clearly ambitious. Mr. Thompson, I have to ask, are you planning any major changes to the building operations? Nothing that would affect existing tenant agreements. Why do you ask? I've been concerned about some of the noise issues from the gym. Loud music, equipment dropping, people shouting during workouts. It's difficult to conduct client meetings when it sounds like there's a construction project happening downstairs. Have you discussed this with the gym management? Sarah's expression darkened. I've tried. The manager, Brad, I think his name is, told me that gyms are naturally loud and that I should consider relocating if I can't handle the noise. This was exactly the kind of information I had been hoping to gather. Brad's dismissive attitude toward other tenants wasn't just rude. It was potentially a lease violation if it interfered with other businesses' ability to operate effectively. I'll look into the noise issues, I promised. All tenants have the right to use their spaces without unreasonable interference from neighboring businesses. After meeting with my other tenants, I spent the rest of Monday documenting building conditions and reviewing maintenance records. The HVAC system was indeed problematic, with unauthorized modifications that appeared to violate city building codes. The electrical system showed signs of unpermitted work, particularly in the areas where Fitness Elite operated. And the parking lot striping was faded and confusing, with no clear enforcement of designated spaces. Tuesday morning, I called the city's building inspection department and scheduled a comprehensive inspection for the following week. I also contacted an HVAC contractor to assess the climate control system and provide estimates for bringing everything up to code. While I waited for the inspections and contractor assessments, I continued to build relationships with my other tenants. Patricia, James, and Sarah Miller appreciated my proactive approach, and their feedback gave me a clearer picture of Fitness Elite's impact on the building. Their complaints, noise, parking issues, and unauthorized modifications were not just inconveniences, but potential leverage points for enforcing the lease. By Wednesday, I had hired a property management consultant, Linda Carter, who had 30 years of experience managing commercial properties in central Indiana. Linda reviewed the tenant contracts and building records, confirming that Fitness Elite's violations were significant enough to warrant formal action. You've got a strong case here, Michael, she said over coffee at my kitchen table. The underpayment of rent, unpermitted modifications, and interference with other tenants' operations. They're in breach of multiple lease clauses. You could issue a notice of default and demand compliance within 30 days. What happens if they don't comply? I asked. They'd face eviction proceedings. That's a long process in Indiana, but it's a powerful threat, especially for a business that relies on its flagship location. I nodded, filing away the information. Eviction was a last resort. I wanted Brad to feel the pressure of compliance first, to realize his mistakes before facing the ultimate consequence. The building inspection the following week was a gold mine of evidence. The city inspector, a no-nonsense woman named Carla Rodriguez, identified multiple code violations in Fitness Elite space. Unpermitted electrical work, an overloaded HVAC system, and a removed load-bearing wall that compromised structural integrity. This is serious, Carla said, scribbling notes. They'll need to restore the wall, get retroactive permits, and bring the electrical and HVAC systems up to code. You're looking at tens of thousands in repairs. I thanked her and requested a detailed report, which she promised to deliver within days. The contractor's assessment echoed her findings, estimating $45,000 to $60,000 in repairs to bring Fitness Elite space into compliance. Under the lease, tenants were responsible for maintaining their spaces and obtaining permits for modifications, meaning Fitness Elite would bear the full cost. With the inspection report in hand, I drafted a formal notice of default outlining the lease violations. Unpaid rent increases totaling $1,400 plus late fees, unauthorized modifications, code violations, and complaints from other tenants about noise and parking. The notice demanded full compliance within 30 days, including payment of back rent, restoration of the removed wall, and submission of permits for all modifications. Failure to comply would result in further legal action, including potential lease termination. I sent the notice via certified mail to Fitness Elite's corporate office and hand-delivered a copy to the West 8th Street location on Monday, April 18th. Sarah from HR was at the front desk when I arrived. Her eyes widened when she saw me, no doubt recalling our last interaction during my exit interview. "Michael, what are you doing here?" "I'm a new owner of this building," I said, handing her the envelope. "This is a formal notice for Fitness Elite. Please ensure Brad receives it." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. I nodded politely and left, feeling the weight of 3 years of planning settle into place. Brad called me 2 days later, his voice a mix of confusion and indignation. "Michael, what the hell is this? You're the landlord now? Is this some kind of joke?" "No, yo, Brad. I purchased the building on April 8th. The notice outlines Fitness Elite's lease violations. You have 30 days to comply. This is ridiculous. You can't just waltz in and start making demands. We've been here for years. And for years, you've underpaid rent, made unauthorized changes, and disrupted other tenants. The lease terms are clear. You can review them if you'd like." There was a long pause. I could almost hear the gears turning in Brad's mind as he processed the reality of his former fat IT guy holding the keys to his business's future. "This is personal, isn't it? You're pissed about being let go." "This is business," I said, keeping my voice steady. "You sign a lease. I'm enforcing it. If you have questions, consult your legal team." He hung up, and I knew he'd be scrambling to respond. Over the next week, I received emails from Fitness Elite's corporate counsel, a firm based in Indianapolis, attempting to negotiate extensions and dispute the violations. My lawyer, David Hendricks, handled the responses, reinforcing that the demands were non-negotiable and grounded in the lease agreement. Meanwhile, I continued improving the building's operations. I hired a contractor to repaint the parking lot lines and install signage clarifying tenant spaces, addressing James Peterson's concerns. I scheduled HVAC repairs for Patricia's office and worked with Sarah Miller to install soundproofing panels to mitigate gym noise. My tenants appreciated the changes, and their positive feedback strengthened my resolve. By the end of the 30-day period, Fitness Elite had paid the back rent and late fees, $800 in total, but had not addressed the code violations or unauthorized modifications. Brad sent a letter claiming the repairs were under review and requesting a 90-day extension. I denied the request, citing the lease's clear timeline for compliance, and issued a second notice warning of eviction proceedings if the issues weren't resolved within 10 days. On the 10th day, I visited the gym again, this time with Linda Carter and a process server. Brad was in his office, his usual confidence replaced by a strained expression. The protein powder samples and fitness magazines were gone, replaced by stacks of paperwork and a laptop displaying what looked like financial spreadsheets. "Michael, he said, standing as we entered. Can we talk about this? You've had 30 days to talk, I said. This is a notice of intent to terminate your lease if the violations aren't corrected by tomorrow. You're going to evict us? Over some electrical work and a wall? An unpaid rent, code violations, and tenant complaints. You've had ample time to comply. Brad's face reddened. You know how much this will cost us? We're already stretched thin. The corporate office is breathing down my neck about margins. That's not my problem, I said. You signed the lease. You made the modifications. You chose to ignore the terms. He stepped closer, his voice lowering. This is about you getting fired, isn't it? You're using this landlord crap to get back at me. I met his gaze, unflinching. You fired me because you thought I didn't fit your image. You underestimated me, Brad. That was your mistake. Linda stepped in, her tone professional but firm. Mr. Mitchell, you have until 5 p.m. tomorrow to provide documentation of compliance. If you fail to do so, we'll proceed with eviction. Brad didn't respond, his jaw tight. As we left, I caught a glimpse of the security cameras I had installed 3 years ago, silently recording the moment. I wondered if Brad realized how much those cameras had captured, not just today, but over years of his mismanagement. Fitness Elite failed to meet the compliance deadline. The next morning, I filed for eviction with the Madison County Court, supported by Carla's inspection report, contractor estimates, tenant complaints, and the lease agreement. David Hendricks assured me the case was airtight, given Fitness Elite's documented breaches. The eviction process in Indiana is slow, but the threat alone was enough to disrupt Fitness Elite's operations. Members began canceling memberships after rumors spread about the gym's potential closure, fueled by local news coverage of the dispute. The Herald Bulletin ran a story titled, "Local Gym Faces Eviction Over Lease Violations," quoting anonymous tenants, likely Patricia or Sarah Miller, about noise and parking issues. The negative publicity hit Fitness Elite hard, as their lifestyle brand crumbled under scrutiny. 2 weeks into the eviction proceedings, Brad requested a meeting. We met at Betty's Diner, the same place where I had sealed the deal with Robert Hayes. Brad looked haggard, his tan faded, his Fitness Elite polo replaced by a wrinkled button-up. "Michael, I get it," he said, stirring his coffee. "I screwed up. Firing you was a mistake. I was under pressure from corporate to cut costs and push the brand image. I didn't think it through." I sipped my coffee, letting him continue. "I'm asking for a compromise," he said. "Give us 6 months to fix the violations. We'll pay the repair costs, get the permits, whatever you need. Just don't evict us." I leaned back, studying him. The man who had dismissed me as worthless now sat humbled, his empire teetering. Part of me wanted to agree, to show mercy and prove I was above petty revenge. But another part, the part that had spent sleepless nights planning, that had endured years of casual insults, knew that Brad's apology was born of desperation, not sincerity. "Brad," I said, "you had your chance to do the right thing. You chose to prioritize image over competence, and now you're facing the consequences. The eviction stands." He stared at me, his expression a mix of disbelief and resignation. "You're really going to shut us down? I'm enforcing the lease you signed. If that shuts you down, that's on you." Brad left the diner without another word. 3 months later, Fitness Elite vacated the West 8th Street location after losing the eviction case. The corporate office announced the closure of their flagship facility, citing unforeseen operational challenges. The space was quickly leased to a local yoga studio, whose owner prioritized quiet, community-focused fitness and agreed to strict lease compliance. A year after the eviction, I stood in the parking lot of my West 8th Street building, watching as the yoga studio's grand opening drew a crowd of Anderson residents. The parking lines were clear, The HVAC system hummed efficiently, and the other tenants reported no complaints. The building's rental income covered my mortgage payments and provided a steady profit, which I reinvested into purchasing another small commercial property nearby. Brad Mitchell left Anderson shortly after Fitness Elite's closure, reportedly taking a lower-level management job at a gym chain in Indianapolis. I heard through the grapevine that he blamed unfair business practices for his downfall, never acknowledging his own role in it. As for me, I remained the same 280-pound programmer, still wearing 3XL polos and thick-rimmed glasses. But I was also a landlord, an investor, and a man who had turned injustice into opportunity. The security cameras of the yoga studio captured the opening event, but they couldn't record the weight of 3 years planning, the quiet rage that had fueled it, or the satisfaction of knowing I had built something better than what Brad Mitchell had torn down. I wasn't stronger in the way Fitness Elite had valued strength. I hadn't lifted weights or transformed my body, but I had lifted the weight of truth, and in doing so, I had reshaped my future, and Brad's on my terms. Thanks for listening to this powerful story. Subscribe for more stories about the surprising ways people change our lives for the better. See you in the next story.